Hello and welcome back to the Dukascopy TV studio for part 2 of our interview with Antiquorum. Julien Schaerer joins me now. Julien, thank you very much for coming back in. We're going to take a look at the Rolex Daytona watches shortly, and I understand it's the 50th anniversary. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
It is, sure. I mean, the Rolex Daytona is an iconic watch. Everybody knows the current models that, they just presented a new model in Basel this year in platinum. But, the history of the Daytona goes back to basically 1972, when they really started developing this new watch for them, which was going to be a new kind of sporty type race watch, which was associated, of course, with the famous Daytona race. Out of that, they created a chronograph, which was a manual wind chronograph. Funnily enough, it has become today the most collectible Rolex that you can find.
And what is it about the Rolex Daytona that sets it apart then from sort of other watch types within the Rolex brand?
I think it's the look before anything, and I think people, when they buy it, they buy a myth as well. I mean, obviously, I've brought a few different models that we'll be able to go through, but it's got a really nice kind of vintagey look. It's still a manual wind, so you still have to mechanically wind it every 1 or 2 days when you're wearing it, and it's really got a very distinctive look, I think, that you cannot find anywhere else today. So that's, for me, is what has really made it an iconic watch.
Okay, so let's start with the first watch here then. What have we got?
So on the first watch, we have what collectors know today as a Paul Newman Daytona. The association with Paul Newman is not really 100% clear, in the sense there's no reason why, but obviously he was a racer, obviously, as everybody knows, loved to race cars, and he was seen very often on a lot of shots wearing Rolex Daytonas and vintage ones. So the collectors associated this particular model, and you can instantly recognize it by 2 features. It has this kind of red outer track on the outside side of the dial, and all the little markers in the sub-dials are these little square markers at the end of the sticks, and that is what actually makes a Rolex Daytona or Paul Newman Daytona. And funnily enough, there's quite a big difference between a regular version, which is the exact same one, except just the dial is different, to a Paul Newman version. It's usually about a value-wise, a regular one is probably worth 25,000 francs. A Paul Newman is worth between 50 and 80. In this case, this one sold for about 115,000 Swiss francs at auction yesterday.
There is this big tie between sort of sport stars, celebrity types, and watch advertising. Was Rolex one of the first firms to really start kind of kick that off, as it were?
No, funny enough is, they didn't really associate this watch with any celebrities. I think it worked the other way around. It was, this kind of lucky marketing, in the sense that, these celebrities decided to wear Rolexes because they're rugged, because they liked the look, and they were, easy to use on an everyday basis. And I think it really worked the other way around. I think the celebrities wearing it is what brought success to the Rolex brand, and not really Rolex advertising celebrities wearing their watches.
Okay, so moving on, what's the second watch you've got for us?
The second watch is another Paul Newman Daytona. This time it's a yellow gold version, so really just very similar to the last one that we just saw. Just a completely different look, because obviously gold on gold gives it a more, obviously, not sporty, but a more dress-up look, of course. But the watch itself is still a fairly sporty look, I would say. If you could wear that on, for example, a leather band, it still looks a very nice everyday watch to wear, even on holidays if you wish. And this particular example sold for around 140,000 Swiss francs.
I know you're very proud of this next watch that we're going to discuss, so I'll let you take the floor on that. You can tell us all about it.
Sure. I mean, obviously, very exciting. I'm still kind of buzzing from it from yesterday. We sold this prototype Paul Newman Daytona, which was a reference 6263. It sold yesterday for 850,000 Swiss francs, which is the new world record for a Daytona. It's more than doubled basically the previous record that we obtained a few years ago. It's the only one of two that was ever known in this configuration, and although it looks very much like the one next door to it, it has these little details, and now today everything is in the details for the collectors. The dial has got a slightly different color. It's a more lemon, it's a more bright yellow color, and also in the sub dials the writing, rather than being a more gilt kind of color, has white graphics in it. And really those two factors alone, combined with the fact that obviously it had never been seen on the market, never been offered before, has contributed to make this the most expensive gold Daytona ever sold. So a very exciting time, I mean, both for the collector's market, but of course also in terms of how significant it is in terms of the price or the new milestones that Rolex can reach at auction today.
In terms of price, you mentioned that it was more than double the previous world record. What has caused that huge price leap?
I think the collectors have just become more and more focused on the rare examples and are willing to pay top prices for either things that have been unseen or unknown to the market, or as in this case, prototype or very early versions that, they know that there were only probably a few examples of each that were ever made. And I think, the same association can be made, in the car world, for instance. Today, you can see that, the best cars today bring the absolute records that have never been reached before. And I think that, those kind of theories apply very well to the wristwatch market as well.
But also, we discussed prior to this interview that these watches, they're really only sort of about 20 years in total kind of between them all. Does it seem unusual then that you do have sort of such a price divergence from the near 100,000 to the 800,000?
No, I mean, listen, obviously we are happy, and we were the first ones to be surprised at, at how high it went. I mean, our estimate, on this one was, higher, almost double than a regular one, so 300 to 500,000. Obviously it surpassed, I think, everybody's expectations. But, as I said, when you know that there's only one or two, and you want to complete a collection that has all the other references spanning over the whole production period of the vintage Daytonas, and this is the last one that's missing, the collectors, it shows today, are willing to pay whatever it takes to get it.
And moving on to the last watch we've got, it's quite a bling watch, really, you could say. What have we got here? Yeah,
I agree with you. I think it's it's definitely quite a statement. But once again, most of these watches were custom ordered. Usually, research indicates, obviously, from the Middle East. It was right at the end of the production. This one was actually custom ordered for Oman, and you will actually see on the case back, you actually have the Oman sword that's engraved. Once again, it's a question of how many were actually produced. We know that due to probably the time, the costs, also at the time to order such a piece, they were tremendously expensive. Probably in the mid-80s to wear such a watch, it seems logical that it was going to be for the Middle Eastern market, but it means that up until today, these references, which actually have a specific reference number due to the diamond indexes and the diamond bezels in reference 6269 and 6270, there's only, I believe, of each 3 or 4 that have ever surfaced on the market in the last 30 years of auction records. So once again, it's the rarity aspect that really determines the price. And we were very glad that yesterday, once again, we set a new world record price for this reference at 450,000 Swiss francs.
Now, these were taken from your recent Geneva auction. Where next can we see watches like this?
That's a good question. I mean, watches like this, I don't think we'll be able to see them again. Right now, obviously, the next auction will be in Hong Kong in June, and that will be the next place for for the next treasures to be offered.
Julien, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks again.
That's all we've got time for right now, but we'll be back shortly with more exclusive interviews for you, so don't go away.